Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Ahsoka Episode 5, Shadow Warrior, a love letter to Clone Wars with Hayden Christensen as a Clone Wars era Anakin Skywalker and young Ahsoka Tano, played by Ariana Greenblatt, aka young Gamora in Avengers Infinity War. But who exactly was our Shadow Warrior this episode? Was it the living force embodying Ahsoka's old master, or the dark side of Darth Vader finishing the Malachor fight in the World Between Worlds, or something even cooler? I'm gonna break down all the Clone Wars callbacks and other interesting production details that you might have missed, from the music and the sound design to amazing attention to detail in the lightsaber choreography of this episode. And yeah, folks, I did it again. It's like 2 a.m. Pacific time as I record this after spending 8 hours writing this analysis. What am I doing? But you know what? I approach these breakdowns as a labor of love, not just as like a review or a reaction or a list of Star Wars trivia or a bunch of weird takes to make you feel like less of a Star Wars fan. I do this because I am so grateful to Dave Filoni and all the cast and crew for giving us these great stories, and I just want to celebrate the craftsmanship that they put into this, and I'm grateful to you for letting this channel be part of your Ahsoka experience. So thank you, and let's dive in. Okay, we open as always with the Lucasfilm sequence of Vader, 3PO, Clone Trooper helmet, HK Assassin droid, Marok, Huyang, Stormtrooper, Chopper, and Sabine's helmet, and finally this episode pays off us spotting that Clone Trooper helmet, as this episode gives us 2 cameos of Clone Trooper Rex, both when he was a captain during the Clone Wars Season 1 era on Ryloth, and when he was a commander of the 332nd Company in the Siege of Mandalore in Clone Wars Season 7. But really just take a moment to appreciate the music here. Closed captioning calls this soft ethereal music. Composer Kevin Kiner tweeted that the music of this episode would be special, with a video of his kid Deanna Kiner on flute. They were co-credited with Kevin and Ludwig Göransson and Noah Gorlick for writing that sick Igya Ka track from episode 1. And in this intro, we're really hearing the purr of the flute mixed with the stinging bursts of the flute, like Ahsoka's patient current age trying to reconcile with her impatient youth. We begin this episode on Cetos, and we get this close-up of the pedestal that held the spear where Morgan Elsbeth summoned the Green Night Sister flames, and we see how this pedestal is forked, kind of like the shape of Vader's tower on Mustafar, and we see the split halves of that spear and gears and cogs now exposed. It really was simple old school machinery, Rubik's Cubable by any art history nerd, that this device was meant to open up to, and Morgan and Elsbeth cheated by using witchcraft to jailbreak it. They violated the intent of whoever the ancient Star Wars Archimedes was who engineered this Antikythera. Jacen, we pointed out last week, wears his father Kanan Jarrus's pauldron on his shoulder with that 3-pronged sigil that Kanan shared with the Doom Wolf on Lothal and Rebels, and there's actually a photograph of Kanan Jarrus pinned to Hera's dashboard, and it's hard to tell, but it does kind of look like they might have used Freddie Prinze Jr. as a model for it, as he was the actor who voiced Kanan on Rebels. And since Jacen plays such an important role this episode of sensing the lightsaber combat through the World Between Worlds, they actually tease Jacen's lightsaber hearing in this moment, as we actually hear a lightsaber hum in the sound mix right before Jacen pops his head out from behind Chopper. Huyang laments,
I told them to stay together, but they never listen. They never listen.
Yes, David Tennant voices this to be so mournful, and his poor droid eyes just droop sorrowfully. It was he in episode 4 who begged them to stay together, and it was only because Ahsoka did not see Sabine and assumed that she died that led to both of their failures. And yes, Huyang repeats, they never listen, and you kind of feel like he's talking about all of the Jedi in general. Like all the younglings he guided to their kyber crystals and instructed how to build their hills, eventually grew up into these stubborn warriors who got involved in political wars and distrusted, deceived, and destroyed each other. Indeed, they never listen. So from here, we cut to this episode's title reveal, Shadow Warrior. And yes, we feel like Huyang is talking about the most infamous node in this legacy of wayward Jedi who never listen, Anakin Skywalker, but it's not just Anakin. There's a cool, deeper meaning to this that I'll discuss at the end of the video. We rejoin Anakin and Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds. Now, I've explained this cosmic dimension in a number of videos, most recently this one that actually goes into Dave Filoni's actual intention and proves why, you know, at the end of the day, it's probably not best to get too carried away with the deep cut fan theories about the gods of Mortis and whatnot when it comes to this kind of thing, because really this is Ahsoka's subjective experience. It's about her dealing with what she brought into this place. Meanwhile, for a fuller context of really everything you need to know from Rebels, please check out our 4-part Rebels recap series. Very, very informational and helpful. So Dave Filoni wrote and directed this episode, but the cinematographer was Kuyan Tran, who frames every shot with stunning composition. Like as we cut to Anakin's view of Ahsoka, notice the path behind her curves off to the left, but when when we see Ahsoka's view of Anakin, his path ends. It just kind of ends in a cul-de-sac there. Ahsoka took some turns to get here, but to follow Anakin down his path would lead to the end of the road. So the two greet each other.
You look the same.
You look old.
Well, that happens.
Yes, they de-aged Hayden Christensen so that he would look the most like her memory of him from right before Revenge of the Sith, but Anakin comments on Ahsoka's older appearance because, yeah, she's played by Rosario Dawson, and yeah, the character would be like 50 now, aging older than he was in Revenge of the Sith. And now, 5 or so years after Return of the Jedi, might be getting closer to his age at his time of death. Even in Ahsoka's various eras of animation between Clone Wars and Rebels, she goes through a dramatic physical change into adulthood. Anakin says,
I'm here to finish your training.
It's a little late for that.
One is never too old to learn, Snips.
Remember, in episode 1 of the series, Ahsoka told Hera that Anakin never completed her training. He had spent years as her master during Clone Wars seasons 1 through 5, but Ahsoka abruptly left the Jedi Order at the end of season 5. And in Rebels season 2 episode 18, Ahsoka watches an old recording that Anakin had made for her as he taught her Form 4 lightsaber combat. So Ahsoka has truly longed for closure with her mentor. And Anakin explains the point of this final lesson.
Live or die.
This episode teaches us that living or dying isn't really a question of lightsaber skills, it's letting go of what you fear to lose. One of the things we heard in the Rebels World Between World episode was Yoda to Anakin from Revenge of the Sith.
Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Attachment leads to jealousy. Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
And now, Ahsoka's most afraid to lose Sabine, and that is what's holding her back, because it's a lesson that Anakin never really could have taught her. But here, Ahsoka says,
I won't fight you.
I've heard that before.
This is a fascinating response from Anakin, because it sounds like it's referring to when Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi says this to Vader as he tosses his saber.
I will not fight you, Father.
Which would mean that this Anakin would have the memory of being Darth Vader and dueling his son in the Battle of Endor, something that Ahsoka probably wouldn't know about unless she and Luke chatted about it, when they were crashing Boba Fett's miniseries. It could also refer to when Ahsoka faced Vader on Malachor in the Rebels Season 2 finale. Initially, she said that she wouldn't leave Anakin, but then she swore to avenge Anakin.
Revenge is not the Jedi way.
I am no Jedi.
Either way, this is not a friendly sparring match between Master and Apprentice. This is really a rematch between Ahsoka and Vader. It's meant to provide closure for that conflict. And Anakin doesn't hold back. His aggressive lunges are just like his combat style against Obi-Wan on Mustafar. And at one point, he stabs his saber directly forward, which is Palpatine's favorite move. Actually, I want to give a compliment to K. Rennick on last week's breakdown for pointing out how Ahsoka's stance while fighting Marok in episode 4 was the same as Palpatine's in Revenge of the Sith. Amazing insight. And thank you to everyone who writes these kind of thoughtful comments. It really means a lot to be able to engage with you all in the comments with this kind of great conversation. So Hera searches for Ahsoka using the same bulky scanner with the antenna that Han Solo used to search for Luke on Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back. Carson Teva comes in and says,
Senator Organa says she can only give us cover for so long.
He's talking about Leia Organa. I freaking love that Leia knows Hera and knows Carson, and she's just helping them sneak around like this. This, of course, is going to be part of Leia's ongoing campaign to form a resistance fleet outside of the New Republic government oversight. Though at this point, she's still a senator. At some point in the future, she's going to be run out of office once the broader public knows that her father was Darth Vader. This is something that gets explored in Claudia Gray's Bloodline novel. Now, Jacen says he senses something in the water. He and Hera turn to Chopper, who chimes in. Yeah, it's just one of my favorite dumb things to try to decode what Dave Filoni utters as Chopper for all these moments. And here, I'm pretty sure he says, well, I got nothing. But Hera closes her eyes and she listens with her son.
The lightsabers.
Yes, they mix in John Williams' Force theme here. All season long, Kevin Kiner has flirted with Williams' themes with leitmotifs, but he just alters little things about them, but here he leans hard into it. Jacen is able to hear this from the World Between Worlds, telling us that it's not just Ahsoka's delusion down there, it is a real realm that she is visiting, and that everyone with a Force connection is able to tap into it. And a reminder that the runes at the edge of the Stonehenge platform are the language that we began to decode in our closing credits map translation video. Definitely a good watch. These runes translate to 2100, which I think might just be a distance to Peridia. Not really sure, but I absolutely love Paul Sun-Hyung Lee's delivery here.
Jacen has abilities. His father, Kanan Jarrus, was a Jedi.
Okay.
Yeah, just a reminder that most people in this universe think the Force is really silly and really spooky. Okay, so back to Anakin and Ahsoka's duel. Anakin twirls his lightsaber. This is the same move that he and Obi-Wan did to mirror off each other in the Mustafar room where Anakin had killed all the Separatist leaders. You remember that moment where they went, and then Anakin does another Palpatine stab, but Ahsoka repels it by doing the same behind-the-back block pose that we often saw Anakin doing during the prequel era, and that familiarity is what seems to catch him off guard because he allows Ahsoka to get a solid kick on him. But what Ahsoka hadn't noticed is that Anakin's aggression forced her down his end of the path to that dead-end cul-de-sac I pointed out earlier. That is all he wanted to do here, to just lead Ahsoka to this dead end so that he could move on to the next phase of his lesson.
I haven't taught you everything yet.
So he slices the path to break the floor beneath Ahsoka's feet, kind of like the Balrog breaking Gandalf's path and causing her to fall through the floor. But it's also kind of like the way Vader fell through the floor during their duel on Malachor in Rebels, right when Ahsoka got pulled through into the world between worlds. So Ahsoka tumbles down this rabbit hole through these pink clouds and lands on some terrain, but now she is younger. Ariana Greenblatt, yes, young Gamora from Infinity War and a number of other roles, like she was in Barbie this year, playing the youth version of Snips that we got to know in the early seasons of Clone Wars. This casting is so good. Greenblatt is perfect in this role. We see clone troopers running past her, some of them with the blue-lined armor and the long rifles, and we see a younger version of Anakin.
Forward! Master! Hurry up, Snips!
Young Ahsoka is back to wearing her headband and the beaded headdress that goes down the back of her Laku that Ahsoka had in her original teenage character design, though luckily they don't have the goofy character design that like shows her midriff. But we also see that she has her original lightsaber, which had a green kyber crystal. And then Anakin, Hayden Christensen, actually looks pretty good here. He has the same haircut and the Jedi armor that the animators made for him in the Clone Wars series. And in the background of that fog of war, you can see a Republic AT-TE or AT-T Walker, which would eventually evolve into the Imperial AT-AT or AT-AT. We also see an LAAT transport or LAT transport gunship, which was first introduced in Attack of the Clones. We're back in the Clone Wars and it's live action. I can't believe we're seeing this. But yes, this is not a flashback because Ahsoka still has her adult mind. She's kind of reliving the memory.
This is the Clone Wars.
Yeah, no kidding.
This was one of our first missions.
Now they are on the planet of Ryloth. I'm basing this on the Twi'leks that we see in the background in the aftermath of the battle. This is likely the Ryloth arc at the end of season 1 of Clone Wars, episode 19, Storm over Ryloth, episode 20, Innocence of Ryloth, and episode 21, Liberty of Ryloth. In episode 19, Anakin and Ahsoka lead some clone troopers to break a separatist blockade of Ryloth, but Ahsoka disobeys Anakin's orders and she gets a bunch of clone pilots killed. Episode 20 follows Obi-Wan liberating a droid-occupied town on Ryloth, and then episode 21 shows their eventual victory with Mace Windu introducing us to Hera's father, the Twi'lek freedom fighter Cham Syndulla. So I think these desert sands are the Jixtuan desert that Mace Windu credits Obi-Wan with securing on Ryloth's southern hemisphere in episode 21, and since we didn't really see where Anakin and Ahsoka were for those second 2 episodes, I think we are seeing the events that Anakin reported to Palpatine and Yoda here.
My fighters have secured control of the space around Ryloth. We have the Separatist cruisers on the run.
And yes, one of these blue-plated clone troopers is Captain Rex, because the episode credits list Tamora Morrison as playing both Commander and Captain Rex. Yeah, that is Rex talking to Anakin and the Twi'leks there. And yes, just a reminder that Ryloth is Hera's home world, where in Rebels, she tried to retrieve her precious family Kalikori that Jacen now likely has a bead on. So part of what Jacen is sensing through the world between worlds is the history that directly involved his maternal grandfather, Cham Syndulla. Young Ahsoka places her hand on this wounded clone trooper and he places his hand on hers. And you know that we're just supposed to imagine that's 2002 Tamora Morrison's face under those wrappings. But this isn't just Ahsoka showing her emotional attachment to these fighters. She is still feeling horrible over her decision in Storm over Ryloth that got a bunch of these guys killed. And actually the music we hear in this moment is Kevin Kiner's Burying the Dead music that played in the Clone Wars finale over shots of Ahsoka burying members of the 332nd. Ahsoka asks Anakin,
But our mistakes cost lives. That doesn't bother you?
Of course it does.
This isn't what I trained for.
yeah, young Ahsoka is recognizing how traumatic it was for young Jedi to transition from peacekeepers to military commanders. It's part of why this series' tagline was Warrior, Outcast, Rebel, Jedi, which we embrace with our Ahsoka-inspired Fulcrum shirt, which you can get at nerdriot.shop. It's one of the best ways to support what we're doing here at New Rockstars. Anakin talks about his place in this weird legacy family tree.
Look, When Obi-Wan taught me, we were keepers of the peace.
This echoes what Mace Windu worried about in Attack of the Clones.
We're keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
But Anakin continues,
But now, to win this war, I have to teach you to be a soldier.
Is that all I'll have to teach my own Padawan one day? How to fight?
Do you even want a Padawan?
It's fun for Anakin to acknowledge this because Ahsoka's entire existence in Star Wars canon came from just a chat between George Lucas and Dave Filoni about whether Anakin Skywalker ever had a Padawan. George Lucas was like, yeah, he did, actually. And Anakin brushes off how much he really hates being a teacher.
I'm joking.
How can you joke at a time like this?
What would you prefer?
Yes, just another acknowledgement of the Clone Wars series and how Anakin and Ahsoka will often joke around in the middle of battle. Here we learn it's just how they're able to get through it. Ahsoka asks,
what if I want to stop fighting?
Then you'll die.
Now, at this point, I don't think this is the actual transcript of the memory of Anakin talking. I don't think he ever actually said this to Ahsoka. Really, this is like Ahsoka's impression of future Vader seeping in, because as she watches him charge off with Rex and the others, an explosion briefly changes his silhouette to that of Darth Vader, and his lightsaber goes from blue to red. It looks awesome, but it's not just Anakin's change, it's the fact that when he's Anakin, he's flanked by clone troopers, his brothers, but when he's Vader, the clone troopers vanish, and he is alone. And thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. We here at New Rockstars love analyzing things, and we're pretty good at it. If you want to understand why a certain character acts a certain way, we can tell you that, but if you want to understand what's going on with yourself, you should talk to a professional by using BetterHelp. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. Whether you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just going through a rough patch, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. If you click the link in the description, you'll see how easy it is to sign up and get matched with a therapist. To get started, just answer a few questions about what you're looking for from therapy and what your preferences are. BetterHelp will then match you with a therapist from their network that's right for you. And if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a therapist at no additional charge without stressing about insurance, who is in your network, or anything like that. If you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/newrockstars to help support this channel and get you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. Now, I'm pretty sure that Ahsoka's reaction here is not what young Ahsoka actually saw and did in the actual battle of Ryloth from Clone Wars. We are really back to a subjective impression of this memory, adult Ahsoka reliving this moment with the knowledge of what Anakin would become. Because really, technically, that's what memories are. We don't really remember things exactly as they happened. When we think back on a memory, we are remembering how we felt the last time we thought about that event. Every memory we have is a derivation of the last time we thought about that event. So as we get older, it's diminishing returns in a complex web of emotions as we've thought back through our life. And yes, seeing Anakin suddenly turning into Vader is just like the moment in the Lothal Jedi Temple in Rebels Season 2 Episode 18, where her vision of Anakin turned into a vision of Vader, and the flickering aspect of it recalls Ezra's view of Palpatine in the Rebels finale and pieces of that Lothal Jedi Temple. Now, the three X-Wing pilots left after the Eye of Sion took off in Episode 4 are Carson Teva, Lander, that's Brendan Wayne, who along with Lateef Crowder does the physical work for the Mandalorian Din Djarin, and Jinsu, played by Chow No-Mova. While piloting with that photo of Kanan looking right at her, Hera says,
I got us out here chasing ghosts.
yeah, ghost pilot, chasing ghosts, nice wordplay, and she asks,
Hey, Yang, where are they? People don't just vanish into thin air.
Well, no. Normally, no.
yeah, Hu Yang must know that sometimes, whether it's Obi-Wan or Yoda or Night Brother Marok, sometimes that is just how these people go. The ghost skims the waves, leading to this awesome transition to the sounds of blasters and lightsabers. Okay, so now Ahsoka, slightly older, now wielding two blue lightsabers, finds herself in the Siege of Mandalore, depicted in Clone Wars Season 7, Episodes 9 through 12, which is set concurrently with the events of Revenge of the Sith. See, by Season 5, Ahsoka had begun to use her green lightsaber and a shorter yellow-green Shoto, both of which she lost on Coruscant at the end of Season 5 during the drama with that false accusation of her bombing the Jedi Temple that led to her parting ways with the Order. So these two blue blades actually came from Anakin later on in Season 7, when they reunited right before they parted ways, Anakin to the Battle of Coruscant that we saw in Revenge of the Sith, and Ahsoka to the Siege of Mandalore that we saw in Clone Wars Season 7 in 2020, set in the city of Sundari. She was helping Bo-Katan liberate it from Maul. Again, these two events were happening at the same time, and it's why Anakin doesn't remember it, because he wasn't there. Now, Ahsoka duels with more confidence now, and Ariana Greenblatt does a really good job aging herself throughout this episode. Now she carries herself with Ahsoka's more jaded stride. I don't know what it is about her just crossing her arms as Ahsoka, or Hayden Christensen crossing his arms and looking over at Snips. It just perfectly evokes what we remember from Clone Wars. Now, the Mandalorians that she fights have red and black armor with horned helmets. These are members of Maul's Death Watch. After Maul took over that group in season 5, killing their previous leader Pre Vizsla with a darksaber, and even after Maul's temporary capture by Sidious, this branch of the Death Watch stayed loyal to Maul and fashioned their armor to look like him. Meanwhile, the clone troopers did the same for Ahsoka. Part of the 501st Battalion broke off to form the new 332nd, led by Commander Rex, and they painted their helmets to evoke Ahsoka's orange and white Togruta markings. You can actually see some of those helmets in the background in this scene. And we actually hear Tamara Morrison's voice as Rex.
Nice work, Commander. We'll secure the perimeter.
Now, as you can see, Rex didn't do the orange paint, he just kind of did the markings in blue. And if you look back at that scene in Ryloth, it kind of looks like they just made one helmet for Rex. That's okay, we can forgive that. Now, all of this would be right before Ahsoka would run back into Maul and have her epic duel with him. And that would lead right into Order 66. So this is a pivotal moment in history where she's talking with Anakin. And Anakin says,
Ahsoka, within you will be everything I am, all the knowledge I possess, just as I inherited knowledge from my master, and he from his. We're part of a legacy.
We are reminded of Ahsoka and Hu Yang's line about Ahsoka's legacy of atypical Jedi, and just remember the links to the chain are Sabine, Ahsoka, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Dooku, and Yoda. All of them pretty weird, but Anakin also echoes what Yoda will tell Anakin's son in The Last Jedi. I think one of the most important lines in all of Star Wars.
We are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters.
As much as I love the title of Shadow Warrior, and again, I'm gonna explain why at the end of this video, I think a really good implicit title of this episode would just be The Burden of All Masters. Ahsoka responds,
But my part of that legacy is one of death and war.
But you're more than that.
But for Ahsoka, more means more powerful, more dangerous than anyone ever realized. But Anakin gets fed up and he says,
Is that what this is about? Back to the beginning.
Yes, so Anakin circles back to his words from the beginning of the lesson.
Live or die.
But this time, the blade is Vader red, and he faces away from her just as he initially did to Obi-Wan on Mustafar, and his eyes burn red as they did when the lava burned his flesh and the hate took over. But really there, it was the skin around his eyes that turned red. His pupils were more orangey yellow. Here, they are just red, because something different is happening here. And Kevin Kiner kicks in with some intense horn music. Yes, this is totally the soprano vocal notes from Duel of the Fates. Now, what is really happening here? This is not truly evil Vader taking over. This is Ahsoka's subconscious projection of Anakin wearing a performative mask because he realizes what haunts Ahsoka, it's not her role in wars past, but really her guilt over what Anakin became after she left him. So he is playing this part to help Ahsoka work through this fear of a failed student-teacher relationship. Ahsoka goes for her own Palpatine lunge, and Anakin catches it, disappointed. He twists her arm back and kicks her through the fog, and adult Ahsoka lands back in the world between worlds. Yes, that is Vader's breathing there, and the lightning flashes to flicker him into Vader charging at her. It's like when Ezra saw Palpatine as Sidious in the Rebels finale. But really what's happening here is Anakin is saying, okay, Snips, you really need that rematch with Vader after Malachor because the fight was prematurely ended by the world between worlds, huh? Fine, I'll give you Vader. This is what you want, let's go. Let's get it out of your system. Anakin says,
You lack conviction.
Yes, they did a voice effect on Hayden's voice to make it sound like it was filtered through Vader's mask. Kind of like when we heard both Matt Lanter and James Earl Jones' voice in that Malachor fight. And when they fight, Ahsoka crosses her white sabers to catch Anakin's red, forming this cool asterisk image, echoing a very similar shot in their duel on Malachor in Rebels. This duel is them finally finishing that one. And it's just kind of fun to watch this and think about how this is the Darth Vader that Palpatine wanted. And because of Obi-Wan scarring the crap out of him, Vader was forever limited to a techno-organic suit, which, don't get me wrong, looks awesome, and Star Wars would not be Star Wars without it, but let's be honest, Hayden is on fire here. Ahsoka is only able to defeat Anakin when her lightsabers get knocked out of her hand, and she switches to using only evasive maneuvers and takes control of his red lightsaber, and that disarming happens off screen. It's the same exact way that Anakin disarms Dooku when they fought in front of Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, and so we think we are headed for a beheading. Ahsoka even steps in close so that the red glows in her eyes too. Here is when the hate is closest to her grasp, and what does she do? She deactivates the saber, she tosses it aside, and she says,
I choose to live.
she makes a different choice than Anakin made with Dooku. She chooses to live. And I love how Hayden shows that evil melting away from his face. He looks down and he looks back up at Ahsoka. The mask has been lifted. He's back to his good-natured mentor.
There's hope for you yet.
It's just another good lesson from Clone Wars era Anakin, and it's awesome. See, Baylan had put Ahsoka back in a toxic headspace of thinking she was part of a cursed legacy of failed mentors. Sabine, in her eyes, was just evidence of this failure. So this lesson between life and death is really Ahsoka acquiring a new perspective on mentorship, to see her training not as failed, but just incomplete. It's the same way she sees her mentorship with Sabine now. Just as Anakin appeared in this space, he vanishes behind the same shoulder. There's an incredible visual where one path of the world between worlds collapses in on Ahsoka's path, forming a line of a reflective water surface. Briefly, we see two mirrored Ahsokas, and Ahsoka sinks into herself. So the two polar ends of Ahsoka's consciousness find each other in the middle, and finally she reaches balance. Since everything Ahsoka saw in the world between worlds was blue and fluid, now it melts back into the sea. It's just implied that Ahsoka physically envisioned this experience while floating in the ocean the entire time, as the Force manipulated the water around her into a construct where she could work through these issues. As Ahsoka floats, her arms are outstretched in a Christ pose as we are witnessing the character undergoing a resurrection. X-Wing pilot Jensu dives in Coast Guard style to get her, and Lander pulls her up, and we definitely hear a voice through the Force saying, "Ahsoka," here. Is that Anakin calling to her though? Cause it kind of sounds female. Could it be Sabine? Are the master and apprentice finally linked through the Force? While Cetos as a planet has always been stormy up until this point, finally the clouds break and sunlight beams into Ahsoka to awaken her on her bunk on the T6. Now she doesn't wear her headband, so we see the barrier between her orange brow and her white laku. Outside, Ahsoka dons a white garment, and later she fully suits up white, these same robes that she wears in the Rebels finale episode, showing how she's completed her journey into Gandalf the White. What we thought was death was actually transformation into enlightenment. Ahsoka once again uses psychometry to read the split sphere. This is Jedi Quinlan Voss's old Force ability to hear a recording of recent history based on an impression it leaves on an object or a location. Mon Mothma calls in to order Hera and Ahsoka to return to Coruscant, saying the Senate Oversight Committee is going to vote on whether to suspend her command, and they pilot the T6 and the Ghost directly into a pod of Purrgil, and the largest one looms in right in front of Ahsoka on the wing. She loves going out on this wing. The imagery and the scale reminds me of Paul Atreides facing the sandworm in Dune, down to the baleen. These are whales' brushy teeth. Denis Villeneuve actually used the same anatomical effect on the interior mouth of the sandworms. Whales have these as filters for the stuff that flows openly into their mouths. Carson Teva faces New Republic Mon Calamari cruisers led by Captain Gerard, played by Asa Davis. Her first officer is the Ishi Tib race, which first appeared in Return of the Jedi. Carson reminds us that he's from the Adelphi base, which I'm pretty sure is that X-Wing and Y-Wing bar that we saw in The Mandalorian Season 3. Jacen says,
"It's just like the stories you told me. How the whales together and the bad guys far, far away."
Far, far away. He describes the events of the Rebels finale using the language of the famous opening blue text of Star Wars, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. This is the first Star Wars title that's taken us from one far, far away galaxy to a completely different one. As Ahsoka uses the Force to communicate with a Purrgil, its massive blue eye looks at her. And like Jonah in the Old Testament, and Pinocchio, and Dory and Marlin in Finding Nemo, Ahsoka and Huyang nestle themselves in the belly of the whale. Actually, riding a sea animal on some mysterious, super powerful current is exactly what Dory and Marlin do, riding Crush through the East Australian current. How old is that Purrgil? 150, dude, and still young. Ahsoka tells Huyang,
"We'll just see where it goes."
It could go anywhere.
I know. But that's better than going nowhere.
This is the happiest we've seen Ahsoka on this series. She is a true Gandalf the White, having aged out of this world and eager to embark on the next great adventure west through the Grey Havens. Choir voices ring out as the Purrgils swim past the New Republic cruisers, and I love how you can see the X-Wing docking bays as they float past, looking so small, giving us a sense of scale compared to the people who would be in those bays. Gerard and her bridge are helpless to just watch, kind of like Thrawn and the Chimera in the Rebels finale, and there's this awesome visual effect as the Alpha Purrgil passes the engine of the cruiser and its eye reflects blue. It's kind of like when you take a picture of a cat, it gets the laser eye effect. It's because it's part of the eye called the tapetum lucidum. The Purrgil charge up, and from the other side of the baleen teeth, Ahsoka and Huyang see this horizontal line of light with streaks of purple in their cockpit. We do not see the stretching stars effect that we are used to seeing for hyperspace jump in Star Wars, because this version is hidden from us. Ahsoka is only able to see it through this narrow slit, kind of like Oppenheimer watching the Trinity test through his special eye gear. It's because unlike the World Between Worlds, this is a trip through the heavens that mortals are not made meant to see the process of. So Ahsoka begins this episode in the dark with the Shadow Warrior, and she ends bathed in light. But who was the Shadow Warrior exactly? What does that really mean? Well, we are reminded of Shadow Warrior, aka Akira Kurosawa's Kagemusha, an amazing 1980 film which had an international version that was executive produced by George Lucas. So in Japanese, a Kagemusha is a political decoy, someone who impersonates a politician to draw attention away from the real leader who might be dead or alien or under threat. It's exactly what Padme Amidala did with her decoys. Or Dave in the movie Dave. So in this episode, Anakin performs the Kagemusha role, a doppelganger who gives a theatrical performance to impersonate a fallen warlord of Darth Vader. Darth Vader himself, based on Kurosawa imagery, of course, so that Ahsoka can finally finish her battle with Vader and learn her final lesson. Still, ultimately, a shadow, a warrior impersonating a ghost. But why do we see ghosts? Not because of the ghost's unfinished business, but because of our own. Please support this channel by grabbing an Ahsoka-inspired Fulcrum shirt available at nerdriot.shop. Be sure to subscribe to the Break Room for episodes of WikiLeaks or Ahsoka After Show. Subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network. Big thanks to Noah Chen for helping write and research this breakdown. Follow me at EA Voss, follow New Rockstars. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.